Hello everyone, welcome back. So we just got done talking about the structure of an atom, and now I want to cover a little bit of the periodic table. Now here's the good news. I'm not going to ask you direct questions about atoms or elements on the periodic table, but I want to give you a quick summary of what the periodic table looks like and how it relates to our body. Because we have a lot of certain elements that make up our body, and then we have some trace elements that are part of our body but not in large quantities. So I wanted to introduce you, if you haven't seen the periodic table in a long time, I wanted to kind of reintroduce you to the periodic table, and so we can go over the major elements of the body or the major atoms of our body. So handout 2B is a picture of the periodic table, and I've kind of color coded it here, and I just wanted to kind of go over the different major parts of the periodic table. Now the periodic table is divided into periods. That's why it's called the periodic table. And so what we end up getting are these columns or rows, and then we get these periods that are going across. Now, each column is called a group, and groups of elements have similar properties. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit and kind of zoom in and out to show you this. But if you look at our first group, we're going to start from the left and we're going to move to the right. The first group of elements, this orange group, are called the alkali metals. And the alkali metals are very reactive, but some of them are found in our body. So for example, sodium and potassium. So sodium is right here, potassium is right below it. If I zoom in, you can actually see this. So alkali metals can be found in our body, all right? And our body is going to take some of these alkali metals and we're going to turn them into ions. So we're going to charge them. See how they have a plus sign? We're going to charge some of these sodium and potassium atoms and make them into ions. And our body uses these for things like nerve impulses and muscle function. So we're going to learn in chapter 10 and chapter 12 how this works, but we are going to use these charged ions of sodium and potassium to run our muscles and our nerves. So we don't have a lot of alkali metals in our body. It's not the primary component, but we do have some alkali metals in the body as ions. All right, same kind of thing with the next column. So I'm just going to kind of scooch this up here. The next column is this blue column, kind of a darker blue column right here. Those are called alkali earth metals. Alkali earth metals are also really reactive, but we have some of them in our body. Elements like calcium and magnesium are important vitamins and minerals, or they are important components of vitamin and minerals that we need to build, for example, our bones. So our bones have both magnesium and calcium in them, but they are these alkali metals, all right? The middle of the periodic table, this kind of lighter blue area right in here, these metals are called transition metals. And transition metals are found in trace amounts in our bodies, and they also provide some important vitamins and minerals. So when we look at this, elements like iron and manganese, copper, when you take a multivitamin, you are taking small amounts of these transition elements because they are important for vitamins and minerals to keep our body functioning properly. Our cells need a certain amount of vitamins and minerals to perform their normal functions and keep in homeostasis. So these transition metals are going to provide that. And you probably have seen on your multivitamins that you need copper and iron and manganese and some of these other ones. We even have trace amounts, little small amounts of gold in our body. Not very much, just little amounts. As we go across, we run into these elements called metalloids. Metalloids are not really metals, but they're not these elements called nonmetals. You know, honestly, if you really look at the periodic table, almost the entire periodic table is made of metals. So our alkali metals, our alkali earth metals, they are all a type of metal, the transition metals. These metalloids are sort of like metals and they're sort of not like metals. And this periodic table doesn't show them very well, but they are these zigzag elements between the purple and the green. We kind of have a zigzag. The best example is silicon. Silicon is a metalloid. Now, our body is not made of metalloids, but I just wrote here that some metalloids are used in medicines. Some metalloids are poisons like arsenic, silicon. These are used in medicines. All right. Now, most of our body is made out of these elements known as nonmetals. And so I'm going to move this up here. These nonmetals are the green triangle. So the nonmetals make up most of the human body. So if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that our nonmetals are carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur. These are the nonmetals. They build our bodies, so they are the primary ingredients to proteins, fats, carbohydrates, nucleic acids. They build our body. Our body is mostly made out of carbon. If you get rid of our water, water's H2O. So H is actually over here as a alkali metal. Sometimes they push it over here because it doesn't behave always like an alkali metal. So if we include hydrogen as a nonmetal, 60% of our body is made of hydrogen and oxygen, and then most of the rest of our body is carbon. That's why they call us a carbon-based life form, because when we look at proteins, fats, carbohydrates, DNA, RNA as nucleic acids, those are all primarily made of carbon. So our body made of a lot of water, about 60% of our body is water, but then the rest of it, all those carbohydrates, proteins, fats, they're made of carbon. Now the other two columns, our body has some, but not a lot. So we have halogens, they're kind of this peach color. Halogens like fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine. Our body does have some of these, so these can be important minerals. They can also be poisons. Chlorine gas, for example, is a poison that will kill you very quickly. But iodine is an important nutrient that we need to keep our thyroids and thyroid hormones functioning properly. The final column, this kind of darker peach, are called noble gases. Noble gases are not part of the human body. Most are harmless, like helium. So you can breathe in helium, it doesn't really hurt you. Some are poisonous, like radon. You know, here in Grand Junction, we're always worried about radon gas. Well, radon gas is this noble gas that can cause cancer. So some of the noble gases don't do anything for us. They're not a part of our body. They're not harmful. But then others, like radon gas, is a toxin and can cause cancer. So this is just a crash course in the periodic table. Now, don't forget, I'm not going to ask you like how many protons something has or where on the periodic table different elements are located. All I'm going to ask you is what part of the periodic table, for example, is primarily the components of a human, or what are trace elements that are used for vitamins and minerals, which ones can be harmful to us. And I'm going to ask you general questions about these groups. I won't be asking you about specific elements. All right, this is not a chemistry class, so I don't want to hit too much on specific chemical questions. We want to have a human twist to this. So this takes care of handout 2B. And next we'll move on to some things like chemical reactions and some other chemical properties that will help us understand the body a little bit better. All right, I'll see you later.